Hello and welcome to a kind of weird episode of Laptop Retrospective. If you've been following me on Twitter, you'll know that I've been pretty much repairing Chromebooks for the last 2 weeks, and I figured that I would set this up so you could see how to do pretty much any maintenance that you need to on a Acer C740. So I apologize for the video quality. It's not going to be the same because I don't have all of my camera equipment and things. What we'll be doing for this particular Chromebook is we're actually going to be repairing the keyboard deck. The keyboard deck and touchpad are not functioning on this model, even though there's physically nothing wrong with it. I don't know what's going on the inside. It could very well be that one of these parts is still functioning. It could be a motherboard issue. I don't know until I actually try and replace the keypad or the keyboard, so that's what we'll be doing. Now, because of this, you have to tear out everything else, with the exception of the screen, which is pretty easy to disassemble. You just pop the bezel and open it up. So we're going to go ahead and start the disassembly process, because there's nothing to talk about because it's Chromebook. All right, so we got screws all the way around the outside that we need to remove. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I've got a tray for all of these just off of the corner of my screen here. The Acer, while a pain to disassemble because you have to take pretty much everything out, is thankfully all held together by screws, which is more than I can say for the HP Chromebooks, specifically the G4s that I've been working on this week, where the trackpad is plastic welded in, so you're not doing a separate replacement of that, which is unfortunate. So if something like that breaks on that model, you're all out of luck. You're replacing the entire top deck. The nice thing, though, is Acer gives you the trackpad in the top deck when you buy it as a replacement part from most resellers. The downside, I guess, to that is very often you end up replacing both, and then you have a lot of extra parts to keep track of. So I've got a huge box of just keyboard decks that have been salvaged for keys and membranes and all of that fun stuff, just off camera here. So we're going to go ahead and just go to that corner, use our pry tool, and pop that out. And then once we're there, we can just use our thumb, push back on the hinge, and everything else will let go, just like that. So once we're in here, the next thing that we have to do is disconnect the battery, which is easily done with your fingernail. Pop that up. Then we have two screws that have the battery held in the housing. Now, the nice thing about these batteries is that they're backwards compatible with the C720s, so if the battery on these swell, and they do very often on the 740, and they'll press up against the trackpad and you can't click it, or it bulges on the keyboard, if you got a 720 kicking around, you can just do that replacement. The order of operations here doesn't matter so much, but we'll start from right to left, and we will remove the SSD, pull that out, one screw, no big deal. Moving on over, we're going to disconnect the ribbon cable for the trackpad. We will peel up the sticky tape there and disconnect keyboard. We're going to go ahead and pull the cable for the daughter board. We'll also disconnect the one down here for the trackpad as well, which may or may not work. Again, I'm kind of hoping that just somehow everything went faulty and that the motherboard is still okay, because if not, that's going to be unpleasant. Let's go ahead and remove the daughter board over here. So we've got one screw that is silver in color, which is holding the daughter board in. It's actually part of the hinge mechanism. And then you have two black screws located elsewhere on the board. We can just go ahead and spin out. And if you want to remove this part first, you just kind of wedge up a little bit to get it over that plastic peg, and then just walk it up and then pull toward you. Flip it up, and you've got a ribbon cable on the other side. Flip that up, and you can just pull this out as one piece. Let's go ahead and loosen up the two screws holding the heat sink down. Now, those aren't captive, but you don't really need to move them either. and then we got 2 screws holding the motherboard in. We've got this one flatter screw, which is similar to the screws that you'll use to remove the trackpad. The trackpad's really trivial to remove. You just pull out all the screws that are there. That's pretty much all there is to that. All right, the next thing we got to do is disconnect the antenna for our Wi-Fi. White is on the left, black is on the right. Just wiggle those out. Unfeed the wires all the way up to the back, like so. And then the next thing we do before we pull this guy out is we have to remove the speakers, and they're held in with double-sided tape. You can remove this connector, although out of all the ones I've taken apart, and it's a lot now, I've found that it's very, very difficult to remove that connector, so I just don't bother. So we're going to go ahead and pull that speaker out using our pry tool to get that adhesive out of the way. Now the only other part that we got to deal with is the display connector. So we just peel up some tape that's very difficult to see. And then once we got it past that point, just kind of reach under, grab the back of the cable, grab the front of the tape, and just wiggle that out. Then you can just grab the heatsink and remove the entire motherboard. After we've done that, we're going to take the black Wi-Fi antenna, unthread it all the way from the top case. And we have to remove the LED indicator board here. And we're also going to have to remove the cable that is holding, or that connects the trackpad to the main motherboard. We'll have to do both of those. Now, very often these cables are held down with double-sided tape, and your mileage will vary, but I usually will pick up the cable from both ends and just kind of gently wiggle it back and forth until it lets go. And then next up, we gotta remove this cable. We'll get rid of this orange tape that's holding it down here. Like that, kind of both ends. Gently wiggle it, and we've extracted that fellow. All right, the last thing that we got to do is remove 2 screws here and 1 screw here to get this hinge to let go so we can do the keyboard transplant. All right, now what we're going to do is just open the display slightly, about a 45-degree angle, and then we're just going to let the keyboard drop. At this point, we should just be able to walk it out. You might need to adjust the hinges just for it to let go. And this is good to keep around for spare parts. Like I said, the trackpad and the keyboard seem to be actually dead, but we can use this for keycaps, key switches, and the membrane underneath. If you cut the membrane with a scalpel, you can actually remove it and transport it to another keyboard that needs it. So it's still useful, even though it might not physically do anything anymore. Let's grab our new keyboard deck, and installation is the reverse of removal, essentially. So we'll go ahead and hinge our new keyboard deck into place, and then we will drop down our hinges, making sure that nothing gets caught. And then we can go ahead and reinstall the 3 screws that we took out for the hinge. Remember, there is one on that left-hand side that is shared with the daughter board for USB. Then what we're going to want to do is a little bit of cable management over here. Just make sure everything's neat and tidy. Get that underneath along this track, through there. So we don't want this to be caught underneath or pinched underneath the main board. We go to put it back in. So now we can start transplanting the components back in. We'll start with the motherboard, lift the display connector out of the way, line it up with the ports on this side of the machine, and just gently wiggle it into place. And then the first order of business is going to make sure that Wi-Fi antenna is being threaded correctly. Around the heatsink. Then we can move our speakers back into position. Threading those back into place, into all the little clips. Just like that. And the first thing that we can tighten down is actually the heat sink. And then we can go ahead and plug back in the Wi-Fi antenna. Line that up until we hear that magic click. We'll grab our trackpad ribbon and flip up the connector and reinsert these. Plug back in the display port connector, or the display connector. It's not a display port. We will put in the 2 screws holding the motherboard in place. Next order of business is going to be this small little board that gives us our LED indicator lights. Then we've got the daughter board. Reattach that ribbon that leads to the LED indicator light, flip it over, and install it back underneath the hinge. Remember that the silver screw goes in the top and the 2 black screws go in the middle and the bottom. Next up is the SSD. Grab that, align it, take the screw, put that in like that. Oh, let's not forget to actually connect the daughter board back up to the motherboard. Like so. All right, now at this point, we can do kind of a quick test to make sure that everything's actually working before we reassemble any further. So to do that, just go ahead and reconnect the battery. You got 2 tabs in the bottom that the battery sits in. And after that, just kind of lift the display up at a 45-degree angle. Plug in your power supply. I've got 2 lights. I've got an active display, which is a good start. And I've got a mouse. So we are good to go. The repair is a success. I will close this case back up and carry on with the rest of my day. I hope you enjoyed this content, even though it is very different and not normally up to the quality that I've done. I am using a document camera, so please let me know what you think about that. That might be something that I want to invest in. It was actually pretty easy to shoot this tabletop with it, even though it might not be at 1080p. At least I don't think it is. At any rate, if you enjoy this sort of video, I'm going to encourage you to do the big 4. Please like the video, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. So if I'm ever doing any work in the field, I'll know that you want to see it and you'll be informed. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.